This movie was about honoring, your elders and the people that have come before you. It's like it was like almost came out of left field.
I really thought that it was surprisingly wholesome, not just in what it was lacking, but because of what was included.
You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm Eric.
And I'm David. And I had a bit of a question, Eric, why we're doing this movie. Can you give me one good reason, why we should spend our last episode of Musical Month covering White Christmas?
Let's just say we're doing it for Pal and the Patreon, huh?
Well, it's not good, but it's a reason. So,
trust me, this is going to work out.
Well, how do you know?
One thing I learned in the podcast was to be positive, especially when you don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough. That is true.
And we're looking at White Christmas, which was nominated by the Patreons, which I didn't go back and verify this. I believe it was nominated by my wife, but it did get the most amount of votes. So there's no chicanery going on.
I was going to say, a little thumb on the scale. For those who don't know, Eric runs the Patreon side of things. So, okay. All right.
Fair and square. Trust me, Violent Night and White Christmas in the same poll our Patreons are some of the greatest people in the world.
How are those the only two? I'm so confused about that. Normally they have like 5 or 6.
They were tied in the total amount. And I was like, there would have been like 7 or 8 total because there are so many ties that I was like, well, these are the two that actually have the highest amount of votes at the, in the nomination process. So I was like, let's just go with that and run with that. Yep. So narrow down the field a little bit. And so this 1954 film, so 70 years, was directed by Michael Curtiz. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it.
Sure.
And stars Bing Crosby, Danny Kaye, Rosemary Clooney, Vera Ellen, and Dean Yeager.
Oh, I thought it was Jagger, as in the father of Mick Jagger, isn't he?
I don't know. I'm going
to.
Well, we go to the next section. I'm going to go ahead and look that up.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be worth checking. He's not British, but whatever. But this week, we decided it would be worth calling in some reinforcements. Somebody who truly loves White Christmas, and so we're bringing in the lovely Mandy.
Charmed, I'm sure.
Thank you. Welcome back to the show. We haven't had you since, it was a while ago, episode 82. You and I recorded on Walk the Line. You remember?
Yes.
Yeah. 2017, that was a simpler time.
Yes, the one and only time I've ever done a podcast. So number 2, here we go.
2's a charm. Charmed.
That's cool. So
excellent.
Mandy, why don't you go ahead and give our listeners a plot summary for White Christmas?
Alrighty. It's a successful song and dance team that became romantically involved with a sister act and then team up to save a failing Vermont inn of their forming commanding general.
And whenever they said sister act in the movie, I kept thinking of Whoopi Goldberg. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a phrase for anything other than that movie. So now I know. So also there's a carryover actress between the two. Right?
Oh, yes. The nun.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very strict nuns happens to be
she's the housekeeper or something.
She's the housekeeper,
right?
at the end.
The busybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. One of the older nuns in the movie. So anyway.
Sorry. Very funny.
Very cool. So on the front end, we'll just go ahead and say this: for a 70-year-old movie, we decided to forgo the spoiler-free section. Most of our thoughts through here on out will be completely open. Open. So if you have not seen this holiday classic, that is really in a lot of ways the prototype of all Christmas movies that came later, and particularly I would say Hallmark movies in particular. yeah, it's like it's a 70-year-old movie. People, let's go ahead and just
Yeah.
knock it off your bucket list if you're planning on seeing it.
It's also one of the oldest movies that we've covered. I looked into this a bit because I was curious. We've covered movies from the 60s and 70s, but then it was Harvey and It's a Wonderful Life. I think are the two oldest. I forget which one's earlier, but those are both Jimmy Stewart, and so this one's a little bit later.
Going out
anyway.
to doing some Bing Crosby now.
Yeah.
But
sure.
so let's go ahead and give it our popcorn ratings. So the stale, the fresh, buttered and salted, essentially our bad, good, or great. So Mandy, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
All right. Well, I rated Buttered and Salted. It is one of my favorite Christmas movies. So if your wife wouldn't have pushed over the tally, if I could have found it, I would have. So good on her.
She's the one you got to thank. Yes.
Yeah. It just seems like they're generally enjoying themselves throughout the film. It's like they authentically enjoy doing what they do, and so it makes it a lot easier, I guess, for all of us to enjoy. So
yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lighthearted, fun movie. So
yeah,
good stuff. Yeah, I will say, as much as I enjoyed it, I rated it fresh. I'm going to be the buzzkill here, but it is growing on me. I was never wild about it growing up as a kid. It was just sort of one of the Christmas movies that the grown-ups would watch, and it was. I guess I haven't grown up yet. I'm starting to, but Mandy's helping me come around on it for sure. It's very similar to one of my favorite musicals, Singing in the Rain, which I've loved my whole life. And I did keep finding myself smiling and laughing, right? I mean, I did seem to be enjoying it. So I guess I like it. But I do love Danny Kaye. Like, it's really, if he wasn't in it, I would probably not even bother. Like, he is a great
character. Yeah.
He's fantastic. And then, Crosby can sing, I guess. So that's something.
You guess.
Just a little. Just a
He's
little.
all right. Yeah. He's all right. So, Eric, how about you?
Yeah, so I went with the fresh versus buttered and salted, and maybe it's probably I would say still really warm fresh. Let's say it like that. It is a fun film. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's just fun. It's one of those you could actually watch year round. A lot of the set pieces, a lot of the songs, you don't have to be around Christmas time to appreciate them, get them and stuff. And it's incredibly heartfelt and sincere. The sincerity in this film really comes across. I will say David Crosby was the voice of Christmas. I mean, so many songs like that we grew up with. Like, he was the initial person that sung them. It was like he was the prototype that then people like I'm going to drop his name. The other famous singer.
Dean Martin?
No, not Dean Martin. Later, Frank Sinatra. Sorry, my brain.
Yeah.
I know. I was thinking of
okay.
those too. Yeah.
Yeah, he was he was the prototype that all of those later people were built off of. Is like they were all
the OG crooner. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this was a film I did
blue
grow
eyes
up
in this
with.
one too. Yeah. Yeah. Extremely blue eyes. So.
Yes, absolutely. And so I grew up with this film, but I never realized the heart behind it until I saw it again as an adult. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago when I rewatched it, and I went, "Oh, that's the plot of this movie." Like, I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea that this movie was about honoring, your elders and the people that have come before you. It's like it was like almost came out of left field, like watching it as versus watching as a kid, and you're only watching it for the set pieces and the songs and the fun stuff, versus as an adult and you're actually seeing like the heart of it. So I did have a little bit of trivia about it, but I think most people I think know kind of about the Rosemary George Clooney connection. It's his aunt. A lot of people thought it's his mom, which I actually thought it was his mom until I started doing some research. Because I know it's actually what his aunt. One of the other ones is the song "White Christmas" was written for another holiday classic, which is 1942 "Holiday Inn." So this would have been 1942 would have been 12 years prior to this film.
Bam.
That film also starred Bing Crosby. And so this song, White Christmas, was literally written for Bing Crosby to sing. It's kind of cool. Bing Crosby has a farm league baseball team or baseball stadium named after him in my hometown of Front Royal, Virginia. He just happened to be in another town, and he was the grand marshal of a parade that they were having, and he visited Front Royal, and people convinced him to donate $1,000 in 1940s money or 1950s money to do the groundbreaking for the stadium. So 70-year-old stadium or 67-year-old stadium is named
really
after
cool.
him. Yeah.
Whoever convinced him, I'm guessing, is somebody who saved his life back in the army, you know.
Absolutely. And the last piece of trivia for this film that I looked up was the Bing and Danny sisters performance. It was not in the script at all, but they were just clowning around, and the director saw how much fun they were having, so he said, "No, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and do this."
That makes sense.
Yep, they had 2 takes, and the take number 1 is the one that's actually in the movie, and the laughs from Bing are real, and Danny's hitting them, and he's got that good belly laugh, and the second cut was a little bit more straight laced, and the director was like, no, let's go with a breaking character.
That's great.
One. So it is kind of cool. I like that.
That's really good. Yeah.
That's funny, because I said that pretty much almost verbatim to him while we were watching the movie. Like, that is a genuine laugh from him.
Yeah.
You can tell that wasn't,
from the straight man.
This is like from his gut. Just hilarious. And so
they're having a good time together.
I love that about it.
And that's where it differs a bit from the other movie that I think this is most similar to, Singing in the Rain, because with Singing in the Rain, as much as wonderful as it is, and as much fun as it looks like they should be having, there was enough kind of behind the scenes stuff that came out later to indicate it was not fun. So, to say the least, we'll leave it at that. But so it's nice to know that they were having a good enough time that they could goof around on set and get stuff added in. I forget that was happening way back when, not just in movies today where ad-libbed stuff makes it in. So
well, there was one song they sung. I think it was early on in the movie. I think it's when they were still in the military part. They sing a song, and it talks about three performers that they get to see for free. Well, that's a real song, and in the real song, Bing Crosby is named it says Crosby so and so and so and so in the song, so they had to change. They had to change the name. They're like, no, that's too much of a fourth wall break.
Yeah,
yeah,
type of thing.
That's true.
Well, I did read. Hope. I don't remember all the names, but I remember Hope because I'm like, I know that one. I know one.
I did read that Bing was very involved in performing for the troops very often, and he made a point to do that all through World War II. Since he was born in 1903, I believe he would already have been in his late 30s, early 40s when the war started. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing to me that he would do that.
He could have served if he hadn't been super famous at the time. But,
well,
and he would have looked about this age, because I remember watching this. I'm like, these are like young army guys. The guy looks like 50, but
they didn't care about that stuff back then.
No, that's true.
No.
Or age differences between love interests. So it's just not really a concern.
No. So. Well, and they would, a lot of times, they would have been married, had children young, and in Hollywood go on to the second marriage and have a 20 plus year younger wife, and then have more children later. That did happen to Bing. I believe his first wife passed away, but anyway,
shortly before
filming of this movie started.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so he went on to have a second family, and
Did he ever get those 9 kids that Danny was talking about? He had a few, but I don't know about
I think he had at least 6, possibly 7. Wow. I'm not sure how many. Dang. He had 4 with the first wife for sure. But there might be 2 or 3 with the second wife.
Okay, getting close. Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
There's some more trivia for you in case you wanted it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go ahead and start moving into our theology rating section. So we've got our diluted, our carbonated, or my cup runneth over. And for the uninitiated, diluted is like there's not much in the cup. Like there's not a lot of themes to really talk about. Carbonated is like, oh no, it's still kind of like there's some good stuff to like get out of this here. And then cup runneth over is like there's so much to talk about that this is going to be a 5-hour podcast. Type of thing. So, David, how about you get us started? Where do you think this falls?
I really expected it to be diluted. I was not even like, I was okay with doing it for sure because I was familiar, but I just thought like, okay, well, this won't be a long episode, that's for sure. But upon rewatching it and paying more attention, I was like, this is surprisingly deep. There's a surprising amount to talk about, which you guys will hear. And for a movie that exists primarily to showcase the song and dance skills of Kay and Crosby, I thought that the plot was just going to, essentially just be a framework for that. And it largely is. But, and that's, again, much like Singing in the Rain. It's like, there's a loose plot tying together a whole bunch of musical numbers. But this one touches on some more surprisingly deep themes that I think are going to be really good for discussion. Like you said, honoring your elders and those in authority over you, what it looks like to be good authority figures. And then also, the value of relationships. So I really thought that it was surprisingly wholesome, not just in what it was lacking, right? Not just because it doesn't have, bad stuff in it, but because of what was included. So I thought that was kind of a surprising deal. So what would you think? Do you agree? Carbonated or?
I did go with the carbonated, yes.
Okay.
I do agree there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were talking a good bit off, before recording and stuff about some of this. And so,
very cool.
If it's leading to good discussion, between husband and wife,
that's a good movie if it's having positive conversations between husband and wife. So
and just to think about the time frame too, like what our country had gone through then, and how important relationships really were after that period of time. So many people were lost, injured, still missing, just how important people were to each other after so much had gone on. And the movie, the year it came out, my grandparents would have been like freshmen and sophomores in high school. And to think about them at that age, both of them just celebrated their 65th wedding anniversaries recently. And so I had gone back into that era to find photos and everything to put movies together for them. And it kind of brought me back to when I was going through that project and how just how neat of a time it really would have been to live to be that close to others. And I don't know, it made me appreciate them more, my elders and what their lives, were like. And it was a neat project, but these movies kind of bring back that time that, things were a lot simpler then. You kind of wish you had just a little bit of that magic after everything, today, everything is everywhere all the time. There's not one photo, there's millions of them, there's not one precious photo of this in a scrapbook buried in the basement somewhere that you have to go through to make a slideshow of. Now it can be plastered everywhere in a matter of seconds. And so I don't know, it's just, to me, just things like that are just more precious, I guess.
They just don't make them like they used to. And when it comes to movies,
the cars
people, cars,
the cars were amazing.
Memories, things like that. So.
People.
The people,
generals, evidently.
So kind of do the right thing, no matter if somebody's watching you or not. Do the right thing. I don't know. That's what I took. I'm sorry.
No,
that's fantastic. Thank you.
How about you, Eric? What did you think?
I went with carbonated. Comedies usually don't have a lot to say because they're usually the plot, if you even want to call it that, is designed to just move from one joke to the next joke to the next joke. And same thing with a lot of musicals. end up being this the same way.
Right.
And generally, musicals though do have more of a plot because the piece is part of the plot. Usually, the song's part of the plot as well.
Yeah.
But I will say this is a fine exception to that rule when it comes to comedies. It is great. It has romance, it has brotherhood and sisterhood, which is rare. Usually only one or the other, and it has that showing your respect to your elders. So this is one of the, like, Crosby at the time, and I at this time and prior, was one of the most popular people in the entire world. And he was very involved with the USO. And so he was intimately aware of how post World War II, the greatest generation that we call them, was beginning to be forgotten and their accomplishments diminished. So you think about this movie it only came out 10 years pretty much after the war. And it's really showing, like, what do you do with this entire generation, these generals, these people who have led in war, and now we're coming back into the regular world, and the regular world is going, cool, I'm a college kid now. I wasn't born. It's like I barely remember World War II, let alone have this idea of what it is that you actually accomplished, and the accomplishments started to get diminished. And I would say we need a similar type of movie like this for our generation, because we have an entire generation of veterans who were very much being ignored. And a lot of it has to do with political divisiveness, and that wasn't all of what was going on back in that day. It was more of just, hey, we're progressing, so we don't need these old people anymore, this older generation. But I would say our generation needs a movie like this or something to make us appreciate our veterans a little bit more. The way that this movie really tried to honor those that came before.
Yeah. Well, it's especially timely because, not terribly long after this, you end up with Vietnam and people coming back from Vietnam and being, spit on and attacked and just,
Korea,
brutalized.
in between.
In Korea. Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty
Korea
ugly
was
wars.
shortly after this film, I believe, is about to actually kick off.
Well,
yeah.
Early 50s. So
for sure. So yeah, it's you're right. It's incredibly timely. And just in thoughts to the one song, what do you do with the general who retires? I'm like, well, for one of them, you elected him president, but I guess Ike is the exception. So.
Yeah, he's the exception. Yeah, he's the exception.
Yeah.
But no, so before we get deeper into the movie, let's go ahead and do a little bit of an ad break here. So we wanted to encourage you to share this episode with your friends. And let's broaden that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to hear more, make sure you go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, etc. And if you're listening on an audio platform, go ahead and subscribe there too. And maybe consider doing that little auto download thing. I always find that to be really helpful for podcasts that I follow.
One quick way you can help support the podcast is just to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also support us financially through Patreon.
Yes, donating a few dollars per month will make you a patron saint. This gives you special access to a whole host of exclusive benefits, including a Facebook group and special channel on the public Discord server. And you get to vote on future episodes like the one we're covering today. And for our premium seating members, you get the special weekly In the Lobby podcast episodes, and you can join us live while we record. And I would say just one quick little thing on the In the Lobby episodes. David and Jam are releasing the Christmas ones, and it's going to be open to everyone. So if you like what you're hearing in those In the Lobby episodes, become a premium seating member and get the full context of the Bonson interview, the AI interview, the what's it like to be a dad, raising your kids to watch good films. Like, we have a lot of cool content out there that we're producing for you guys. So we're looking forward to doing more.
And a lot of exciting stuff planned for the new year, right? And so we've got several interviews lined up, and we're looking to get more. Honestly, I love the In the Lobby content. Some of my favorite stuff we've done in the 10 years that this podcast has been around. And one other thing that I want to briefly mention is for those of you who like free stuff, who doesn't like free stuff, we got a bunch of stickers. We're looking to get rid of these. And so if you go ahead and give us a 5-star rating and a review, specifically on iTunes, because that's where most people listen audio wise, go ahead and do a 5-star review and just, some words there, right? Just give some feedback on what you think is what you think people would find helpful. That's not just for our ego. That's to help other people find us. That's essentially how one of the ways that iTunes works the rankings. Screenshot that, send it to feedback@popcorntheology.com, and then I will mail you 2 stickers. One is for you, and one is for a friend who doesn't know about the podcast. They have a little QR code on the back, and it's just a good way to, spread the word, if you will, about what it looks like for Christians to engage with entertainment in a God-honoring way. So, I guess we should go ahead and drop the ads, right?
Yeah, let's drop the ads.
Popcorn Theology has been mindfully viewing cinema from a godly perspective since 2015. But why? Where did it come from? Well, one of the inspirations was our host, James Harleman's book, Cinemagogue, published in 2012, exploring the intersections between film and faith. And now, fresh off the press, is an updated edition of the book, the Cinemagogue Director's Cut. This version contains over 40 pages of new content with reviews and recommendations, movie references, illustrations, further shaping the story-formed argument for God's existence while also delving deeper on hot topics like how we deal with sex and nudity in film. It's the how-to guide for all things popcorn theology. And this time, it's not just available on Kindle and in paperback, but also a hardcover edition for all you true book lovers. So if you like movies, if you're a cinephile, if you spend hours talking film, this book is definitely for you. Or if you're a casual consumer who thinks movie making exists merely for diversion, this book may just change your life. Cinemagogue available now at Amazon.com. For bulk orders or signed copies, check out Cinemagogue.com for details.
Ten years after a brutal war, former Navy SEAL Doyle in an armored bus prowls the broken remnants of a devastated America. Jonathan pastors a small church. When he meets Doyle, he sees an opportunity to expand his ministry. The two men strike a bargain. This journey will change them both in ways they could have never imagined, as Doyle's unbelief collides with Jonathan's faith. Eric Landfried's Solitary Man is an action-packed, post-apocalyptic story with a solidly biblical worldview. This Ambassador International release and its sequel, Conflicted Man, are available today. Order directly at ericlandfried.com.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's a big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
Snow, 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 snow. It won't be long before we'll all be there with snow, snow, snow.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to us talk about White Christmas, and as we start to dig deeper into the theological themes that we can get out of this. So I'll go ahead and get us kicked off, started rolling with that. Mine was a little bit more of a general overarching theme versus a specific theme pulled out of this movie, or that has to do with the plot, is really how Christmas is. I like to talk about how Christmas is a cultural touch point. And it happens, it's one of those special things that it just happens once a year. It's a very cultural type of thing, but it brings to mind family, it brings to mind home, and in particular, brings to mind people we have deep affection and connections with. And Christians in particular, is like a lot of times we miss these particular touch point opportunities because don't get me wrong, we rightly are doing this. We're focused so much on the proclaiming the reason for the season that we miss the opportunity to just shoot someone a text and say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Hey, I'm doing this. It's like, we're constantly trying to teach our kids that, no, it's not about Santa Claus and it's not about presents. It's about Jesus. But at the same time, it's like, well, are you a good gift giver simultaneously? Well, it's like, the culture has these things built into it that allow Christians to go, hey, even if Christmas was a quote unquote pagan holiday, which it is not, I'll just start there. It is not. Even if it
Christ
were,
Yeah.
even if it were, it's still a cultural touch point where they're talking about things that are so closely aligned with the Christian worldview and the Christian message that we can use them, that we can do it. And this movie, the way I like to talk about Christmas movies and how I define what a Christmas movie is Christmas a character in the movie? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, would the plot of the movie take place if Christmas wasn't there,
involved?
Right. And in this movie, that's one of those things. The only reason why the sisters are going to Vermont is because it's Christmas, and that's, it's supposed to be the busy time of year, for them. The beginning of the movie, when he's singing White Christmas is one of those things that brings all of those soldiers together. It knits them all together. When he's singing that song, the titular song, it brings to mind something different for every single soldier there. But the thing that is putting in their mind is home. And so Christmas, none of the plot points in this would happen if it weren't for Christmas. Whether you want to do it from the Christian perspective of the meaning of Christmas, or just the cultural touch point of Christmas, it wouldn't have happened if Christmas wasn't there. And this film in particular, how it uses Christmas, it uses this occasion to heal the wounds of war and to alleviate the disappointments when the earthly powers fail. And it's really captured in the song of, what do you do with a general when he's no longer a general? And I was like, what do you do? It's like, it's this disappointing thing. He had become a major general. He had dedicated majority of his life to his country. And then his country just goes, thanks, but we're kind of good. I was like, we don't need you to re-enlist. We don't need your institutional knowledge anymore. And that's a blow. That's a blow to anyone. Like, whether you're a general or a janitor, that's a that's a major blow to you. And Christmas, the occasion of Christmas, it's what brought the characters to the end there. They found out the need of this man who they love. And they were able to then bring all of the soldiers together. And again, it's all wrapped around Christmas. If Christmas wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened. And so then it asks you the question of, well, what's Christmas supposed to be all about? And so I just picked two sections. Actually, both of them are actually from Isaiah. A lot of it's very popular. It's usually only read this time of year. But I wanted to go, this is what it is. And this is actually the hope that Christmas is giving to the general. It's giving to all the other soldiers there. And it's the hope that's underlying even just a cultural attempt at Christmas. So I'll start with Isaiah 9, starting in verse 2, is, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the trampling warrior in battle tumult, and every garment ruled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this day forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. And again, that's one of the most Christmassy things you can ever do. It's like Handel's Messiah has this lifted completely out of it. It's one of the main songs in Handel's Messiah. And that's one of the parts that I loved is for every boot of the trampling warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. What that's saying is, what do you do with a general when he's no longer a general? He celebrates the birth of his savior. That's what he does. There's no need for a warrior anymore. He's given a different purpose. He's now able to live in celebration that the kingdom, that the wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, his government is increasing, and with that increase is peace. And there's room for that type of person, a former general in Christ's kingdom. It's a lot of hope there. And then so Isaiah 25, starting in verse 6, is, on this mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away every tears from all faces. The reproach of his people will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. And again, that's that. What do you do with disappointment? The general he gave his life to his country. He sunk his pension into this. God seems to be against him because God won't bring the snow. It's like everything is happening. Yeah. Well, what's God doing through the instrument of the birth of his son, Christmas? He's bringing his former soldiers to the general to show the general that no, what you did in life, we appreciate. We appreciate everything you did. Although your government is forgetting you, yeah, your Father in heaven hasn't. Your sons here on earth have not. Like, we love you. I know you'll talk a little bit about this with this song later. It's like they love this guy because he's hard on them, because he's a good leader. And so I think with that we can start to transition into another point. But yeah, it's really one of the great things about the Bible is the arrival of Christ onto the scene changes everything. It doesn't mean you don't get to be a soldier anymore. It just means you have a higher calling, that when that part of your life ends and you start to transition, it's a glorious thing. And when your government fails you and doesn't recognize your worth, God's there and he will wipe away all of the tears from all of the faces. I mean,
it reminds me of those verses about, the swords being beaten into plowshares, that, and even for that matter, quotes from George Washington, right? He knew that after the battle had been won, and then he would lead the country, and then he would step away, yielding his power, that he recognized that there's a time for war, there's a time for peace, just like Scripture says. And so I never really thought about that aspect of it with this movie, for sure. But another thing with the general, not only is he dismissed, he's kind of mocked in a way. The way that the letter reads when he gets it is like, oh, thanks for the good laugh, like, oh, you want to come back? And it's like, oof, dang, like that had to sting. That was such a hard scene to watch, because it's like Bing is reading it and he's like, oh, I shouldn't be reading this to him. Yeah, this is a private thing. Yeah. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's easy to look at Isaiah 9 and say like, oh, unto us a son is born, and kind of wraps up there. But to forget then that, he's going to establish justice, right? This child is a ruler. So exciting stuff.
All right, cool. So David and Mandy, or Dandy, what are some of the themes that stood out to you guys?
So fun fact about the Mandy song that you guys heard earlier. So that was almost played at our wedding. I can't remember why we didn't. Well, it was down to 2 songs, and I thought we were going to do both, but I guess we just landed on there's a song by the Bobettes called Mr. Lee.
Oh, that's right.
Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Lee. And
that's
so
true.
we were going to do our entrance into the reception. Mandy, there's a minister handy. There's a ring for your finger. We should have done that. I regret it already.
Ring on the finger.
Yeah.
Should do it again. Or just tell people you did. No one.
Yeah. There you go.
Do over.
Exactly. Well, if we ever do like a renewing vows kind of thing, we'll make it right then. So
yeah, we'll get better pictures this time.
Yeah, true. So yeah, as far as themes that stood out to me, one that really jumped out this time, I mean, really, and from the first scene, is this movie gives a refreshing example of God honoring authority and an authority figure that commands respect. And again, in a very unlikely movie, right? One that I just thought, it's just song and dance, Danny Kaye kind of stuff. And there's a plot, what? But it actually shows General Waverly, who's an incredibly virtuous man in everything that's conveyed to us. He's contrasted with people like the incoming general, who's harsh and, frankly, a bit of a humbug. And the guys are later reflecting. So Bob and Phil, so Crosby and Kay, are reflecting later that Waverly put them first. He said, we ate, then he ate. We slept, then he slept. And then, then he got up and no one slept for 48 hours or whatever. But I still just thought that was, and they're saying that while he's standing there like a waiter, like a server in the restaurant. I just thought it was a really awesome image of servant leadership. And so in Mark 10, this is right after James and John tried to pull their little coup on the other apostles. Like, hey, is it cool if we're like co-leading with you in heaven? And they all got mad. And Jesus says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. For whoever will be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave to all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so I think what we get with a little picture of is that Waverly is acting like Christ in this way. He's a bit of a Christ figure. So he wasn't harsh with his men. He didn't lord his authority over them. But the thing I thought was even more interesting, he didn't swing to the other extreme that's really common in the world today of being a doormat, right? It's very easy to say like, oh, I'll be a leader or a father or a pastor or a whatever and I'm not going to be harsh with the people I'm responsible for, but then they end up becoming a doormat. And the kids are running a house, or the inmates are running the asylum, or whatever metaphor you want. And but what I thought was really cool is the soldiers are singing, "We love him, we love him," which is another cool thing. We got men showing appreciation and affection for other men. But then they said, "We love him, especially when he keeps us on the ball." And he did. He kind of chewed him out a lot. Like we wouldn't be any good as generals. You weren't any good as privates. And so he held them to a high standard and seemed to scold them when it was necessary, which, even that reminded me of Hebrews 12, which says, so the Lord disciplines the one he loves. He chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there that the father does not discipline? And so there's some really cool family imagery in this story. Not only does Danny Kaye consider himself and Bing Crosby to be brothers, right? Their characters they see each other as brothers. They seem to view General Waverly as their father and treat him with that respect that he has earned. So I just thought it was a really surprisingly good picture of that leadership, walking the line between being harsh and getting walked all over. And that is what caused them, when they saw him years later, surprised in the, entryway to the hotel, to be like, sir, dropping their bags. So I don't know. What did you guys think? I mean, was that, do you think that was on the money, or was there another aspect to that?
Yeah. So no, that point that you just brought up is like, you can tell he was a good general. How they can sing, we love him. But then the second they see him 10 years later, they drop what they're doing and salute. Like that, it was like you have to be a good general.
Right.
It's like, and I think that's one of the good parts about it is a father's role or a general's role is not only to win the battle or win the war, which granted that is their goal, but it is also to build men. It's to build them in a way that they become once the hand is no longer there, the directing, guiding hand, that they can go and they can accomplish things in their life that they become full orbed men, really, that are then able to, in the context of this movie, they're able to turn that back around and give this wonderful gift to this general who life just seemed to kick the second he got out of the army. And these guys who he had poured so much into were able to then give him this wonderful gift back of going, no, you matter. That who cares what the brass thinks about you and your worthiness to serve Uncle Sam. All of us love you and we appreciate everything that you've done.
Yeah. Just a good picture of selfless sacrifice. They kept saying, well, Wallace and Davis could make a lot of money off this or whatever. And they were like, nope, we don't want the TV revenue. We don't want anything about that. We don't want them painting General Waverly as a sympathetic figure. We're doing this because he deserves it. And even though it may cost us a lot, we're going to do the right thing anyway.
How much is wow? Yeah.
So, because the general sacrificed for his men, they in turn sacrificed for him. And I thought that was neat as well.
Yeah, exactly. That was really cool. I think, one thing I like watching in movies is what gets said between what the subtext is. So you mentioned earlier that the soldiers that are hearing him sing White Christmas, they're thinking of home. One great thing that the movie does in that first scene is it shows, it kind of pans through the crowd a little bit, and it shows them, these battle-weary soldiers who are on the front lines. I mean, they're really close to wherever they are in France, to some, I assume France or something, to some active war zone. And then we see the general is looking, and he's seeing all of this. And so we're seeing it through his eyes. There's another great moment that happens later where they trick the general into having to wear his uniform, and he comes down the stairs, and it shows his granddaughter looking up at him, and a pretty lingering shot of her just wonder at him. And I was just like, There's no other family mentioned, just him and the granddaughter. But I just thought the wonder that she had in him, already knowing him as the post-war general, she would have been a young kid when he came home. I assume a pretty young kid, because I think they said it was 10 years later. And but she still sees that he commands that respect. And I don't know, I just thought that was really, really special. But another theme that really stood out kind of gets back to the central premise of the movie, which, again, I'm kicking myself for seeing it as so contrived earlier. Maybe I'm the cynical one. But, there's not a plot to this movie. But really the central, impetus is that Phil is constantly trying to find Bob a wife, right? And so Danny Kaye is always setting up Bing Crosby with, with whoever he can find, even if they're not, nuclear scientists or whatever. But he says not a date, not a groupie, a wife, right? He's trying to find a woman for him, admittedly, so that he can have time to get a massage or something. But to get him to not be a workaholic. Take a break, man. And it's because he recognizes something in Bob that is incredibly biblical. I thought it was really cool. He calls him a lonely, miserable, unhappy man. And when he says, I'm not unhappy, I've got everything I want. He said what I think is one of the strongest lines in the movie. Well, then you're happy for the wrong reasons, which is worse, because you don't have the most important thing, a girl. And,
Amen.
It's easy to say that as just like, oh yeah, this is a movie that is like, it's a romance movie. They have to make that the most important thing. But we would quibble as Christians that, our top priority should be to the Lord, blah, blah, blah. But the first thing that God did was put man with woman, right? He put man in the garden and then promptly said, he shouldn't be alone. This guy shouldn't be left alone. He's going to get into some kind of trouble if we leave this dude alone, right?
Like when we're driving somewhere, where are you going?
Yeah, I don't.
He misses an exit.
Straight.
So where are you going?
Yeah.
God said, nope, that's a bad idea.
Don't tell me how to drive.
Adam's going to get lost.
I'll tell you where to drive. Yeah.
Make Eve ask him, make Eve tell him for direction,
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, he says, in Genesis 2:18, the Lord God had said, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. And so I just thought this movie did a really good job showing that, the importance of that. I mean, and it reminds me of people today, because people today make the same type of excuses that Bob made in this movie, right? Where I'm not naming names, but I know some folks who have mindsets of just like, I don't need a wife, I don't need a husband, I don't need a person in my life. I've got everything that I need. Or for that matter, some people who choose not to have kids, sometimes because they're unwilling to give up their independence or their whatever it is. I do think that it's worth realizing that God designed us to be part of a community, part of a family, to have those relationships and responsibilities. And, every time I meet a young parent, a young father, I'm always just, and if I have the opportunity to speak into their lives, I'm like, this will change you more than anything else in your entire life will change you. Mm-hmm. Forget college, forget any great experiences that you have. Becoming a father, leading a family is the biggest life change that you'll undergo. Getting married as well, but to a degree, once the family becomes more full and more whole, there's something about that you're going to give up independence. So what? Yeah. It's going to happen. That's going to happen. Yeah. That's your independence.
Your doctor is going to have friends. Yeah. They're not going to be alone anymore.
Exactly. And so anyway, I did think as well, there's this other great quote, where he says, I'll get around to it eventually. And then Danny Kaye's line, I had it wrote it down. It's just too hard. My dear partner, when what's left of you gets around to what's left to be gotten, what's left to be gotten won't be worth getting, whatever it is you've got left. If I figure out what that means, I'll come up with a scathing retort. Anyway, it's true. Wait too long. I mean, God's got something for you. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling with those decisions, just leave it in the Lord's hands. And have 9 kids or whatever. So
no, anyway. I definitely agree with that point. And it was like, how do you argue against God when he says it's not good for man to be alone? And was he talking specifically about Adam? Yes. But he's also talking about all of mankind at that point. It's like, we're not meant to be alone. Men need to have brotherhood. Sisters need to have sisterhood. Husband and wife need to be close. Husband and wife, they need to have a family. They need to have kids. So it is all of this community thing. And the American impulse is that, like you said, what Bob says, I am happy. But no, you're happy for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. And it sounds that goes such against the grain of it, because I don't know how many people I've heard someone goes and does XYZ and people go, well, as long as they're happy. It's like, since when did happy and righteousness and holiness come together? Should being righteous and holy make you happy? Yes, it should. And again, it's the whole thing of of things being rightly ordered. And David, to your point about the difference between getting married and having a child, getting married was fun and exciting. It's oh, cool. I've got a new partner to come and go on adventures with me and we get to be with my best friend, get to do all this type of stuff. Awesome. Having a kid was more of this sword of Damocles, that weight of responsibility above your head. It was the second I held my son, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
everything in my life has changed.
Mhm.
Everything in my life has changed. I was talking with men from my church last night about this. Is you would think logically when I had my son, I was going through a rough patch, let's just put it that way, with my office, with my work.
Mhm.
I knew I was leading in the direction of getting fired. But I could somewhat avoid it if I just kept my head down and just like did. He was like, no, I'm just going to keep my head down. But having a son made me even more bold of going, no, what's going on here is just not right. So go ahead, fire me. I don't care. It literally is like, it was one of those things like, yeah, I had the weight of the responsibility of I have a new mouth to feed. I have to keep doing it. But at the same time, it gave a boldness. And several times I said to myself is like, what kind of dad do I want my son to have? Like, it's like, it is a different thing. I was way more worried, like when I first got married, way more worried about providing financially for my wife and everything. But then as soon as I had a son, the realm of responsibility changed. It was like, no, it's more about doing 100% the right thing, even if I get fired. And just trusting in the Lord. So it is a very, very different type of thing. And I think a lot of Christians in particular, we've become just as worldly, as the world, when it comes to like a lot of our ideas of, oh, we're going to wait to have kids for XYZ, or we'll see. Yeah. It was like, well, I think we're going to have one or two kids, and choosing the amount instead of just going, the Lord will provide. I was like, if I have 10, I have 10. If I have one, I have one. It's
unfortunately for some couples, if they have, they try and they can't have any, and that's
sure.
That's awful too. It's not like they want that, and hopefully they'll be able to seek other and help other kids grow up too. Even though if they're not their own, but it just becoming a parent does give you a ton of responsibility, and along the happiness, you're not. World is imperfect. No marriage is perfect.
No.
Everything is, it is going to be what you make of it, but God's always there. And so it's kind of,
And another thing too, because I've had some really interesting discussions with people. Think about what Paul said, right? We say it's not good that man should be alone. That's in Genesis. It's incredibly biblical. Elsewhere in the Bible, Paul says, I kind of wish everybody would be single. It's a weird thing, because he's saying, like, look, it makes ministry so much more fruitful, so much more effective. He could devote his life to ministry. And I've known men and women who stayed bachelors/bachelorettes, and that was their, like, in order to devote themselves to ministry. And I've known couples who, for whatever reasons, sometimes being physically unable to have children, have been able to invest into the lives of countless young people. And so, this concept of, the command to be fruitful and multiply, there is a biological aspect to that, but there's more than that. And so for those that are unable, and the caveat I had earlier is those who choose not to have kids just out of selfish motivation. But for those that can't, or that, they're single and they're devoting their lives to ministry. Well, how are you raising up the next generation? You don't get a pass on this. Paul didn't get a pass on this. He didn't give a pass on this. And so, whether that looks like foster care, adoption, youth ministry, after school programs, there's all kinds of things
I've said before, is like the quote unquote gift of singleness that Paul is describing is so that you can wholly devote yourself to the church and the gospel and the work, not Saturday brunch. That's,
the trips to Aruba.
It's a different ordering of your priorities.
Absolutely.
Pick up the mantle, not the mimosa, right?
If you can do both, do both. But yes, if you can only do one, pick up the mantle.
Just saying.
You're
That's
fine.
great. So let's go ahead and move into some quick round of lightning rounds. Some receive, reject, and redeem. So let's go ahead and what are some things that we can thoughtfully reject from this film? David, how about you get started?
Yeah, so I think in terms of rejecting, one thing jumped out at me on this viewing, and it's one of the funniest things in the movie is the way that the incomparable Danny Kaye manipulates the still incomparable Bing Crosby. Is, I saved your life. Oh, I wouldn't want to go to any trouble. I wouldn't want you to feel any special obligation. And he looks at me he looks at him with those big doe eyes, and he's got him wrapped around his finger. Again, hilarious, but we should manipulate people like that. So it's a pretty obvious reject there. Pretty messed up to manipulate other people into doing what you want them to do. Guilt is a weapon. And, in Christian culture, we can sometimes view guilt. I mean, there's a biblical concept of that. We are guilty and accountable before the Lord. But we're not the wielders of the sword of guilt. So anyway, that's my main reject point. Not a ton else. That jumped out to me. I don't know. What did you think?
Part where Emma, works at the inn, the busybody, if you will, listening in on the phone and assuming what was happening and then spreading that is always dangerous. It's not lead to unintended consequences. So I think we could probably ex-nay that.
Kick that one.
Yeah. Reject. Sorry. Reject.
Reject.
But
I'm a newbie.
Yeah, one of those parts on that is true. That was one of my rejects as well, as being that busybody or the gossip, and that misunderstanding of that phone call is what drives Betty away. It's like she's only hearing secondhand knowledge. Matter of fact, the busybody actually changes the figure from 100,000 to 200,000 in her retelling of it. It was like she was even embellishing it and going above and beyond with it. And really a lot of it has to do with, now granted, it's a movie, so there would be no plot. There'd be no third act crisis situation that has to be resolved if it weren't for that. But it's really one of the things when you believe Betty believes everyone has an angle, and having an angle is a bad thing. And so if you believe that angles are a bad thing and you're already predisposed to believe everyone does, you're going to automatically believe the worst. You're going to hear one bit of information and just run with it in the worst way imaginable, because you're already thinking that direction of going, everyone has an angle. Having angles is bad. They're a famous person, so famous people only become famous because of underhand deals and stuff like that. So of course he would use this kind old general as a way to boost his image. And that's just how it was one of those things. Reject being a busybody. 2, reject just having having a pessimistic mindset, I would say, is like, go ahead and talk to the people instead. And that's the other reject I have, is she left without talking to anyone, talking to anyone. She's there were some conversations here or there, but never point blank, why are you doing this? Why are you taking advantage of him? And he went back, what are you talking about? No, this is what I'm doing. As it was only when she saw him on TV is when the truth actually came out, where she had done what the Bible says. I believe it's in Leviticus. It says, you shall not be angry with your neighbor, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor. The amount of times we don't want to reason frankly with our neighbor because we're like, oh, it's not going to do any good. Yeah. It's they're set in their ways, or we have that thing of they have an angle. So we're just assuming the worst of them. So those are the 2 things to reject: is reject not talking to your neighbor when there's an issue, and reject being a busybody, and reject the mindset that if someone has an angle, it's always for nefarious and evil purposes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and even colored the way that she, so she does, after finding that out, talk to Danny Kaye briefly, and what he says, oh yeah, it's pretty good, right? Oh, make sure you don't tell him. And so she's assuming the worst.
He uses
from that.
He uses the word angle. Yeah, it's a pretty
Right.
great
Yeah.
angle, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Which only furthers what's going on in her head.
And what's
Yeah.
funny about that too is that the only reason she thinks that is because Bob, whatever, got under her skin about it. Because at first he says it, and she thinks, well, that's a pretty cynical view, or whatever she said, and then he's like, oh no, but it's true. And so he got in her head, and then she started to view him in that way. So yeah, what good writing, excellent writing.
Yeah,
it's true.
But not a good way to live.
It's Chekhov's angle. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Let's have some ideas that we can receive and redeem.
Yeah. So in terms of receive, I mean, we've already hit a lot of these up, but the fact that there is respect for authority figures and leading in such a way as to warrant that respect, both portrayed here. We also get a really good look at selfless gift giving, because not only are they, giving of their time to help this guy, they're apparently giving a wow amount of money in order to do it. And so that's, pretty generous, even though they're presumably pretty wealthy. So I don't know. What did you think, babe? Any other things from this that are worth receiving?
Yeah, one of my favorite songs, other than the Christmassy songs in movie, is when Betty and Bob can't sleep, and they're singing about counting their blessings. And I used to work night shifts at a nursing home, and it was really hard to sleep during the day. And so I would listen to that song to help me fall asleep during the day, so then I could then wake up and go back to work at night. Or when you have the days where you have to switch, and then you're back to people who are out and about during the day. And so anyway, that I personally, that was always a good one for me. And just, it's especially this time of year, people are always thinking about what they're thankful for at Thanksgiving and counting them. But I don't know, it's a good reminder, count your blessings. There's even the little ones. And that just a good reminder that not everything is awful all the time, even though it seems like it is. This time of year is stressful. You're traveling. There's kids, family. People are sick. People aren't sick. You got, there's all kinds of different things that can keep people apart at this time of year, but there's a lot that brings people together too. And even if you are apart, count the blessings that we have. The technology now, you can see each other. You can call each other on the phone. You can Zoom, whatever. But just even throughout the rest of the year, continually count the blessings you do have. So we have so much really to be thankful for.
Yeah.
That's
I love
great.
in that song, he says, when my bankroll's getting small, I think back to when I had none at all. Right. It almost seems like if the Apostle Paul was a crooner, he would sing a song kind of like this. I found the secret to happiness. You know what it is contentment. I can do with much, I can do with little, in all things to be content. So, I agree. It's definitely, and especially at Christmas time when the bankroll is going to get small for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Consider like, wow, how blessed am I that I have a bank account, right?
Still look at it till January.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Our family motto, it could be worse.
It could be exactly. Yeah. It could be worse. Yeah. And then those little reminders are worth having every now and then. So
For
sure.
Amen.
What do you think, Eric? Any receive points or redeem points?
So a redeem that I have is actually the everybody's got an angle. And I would say that having an angle isn't always bad. I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, God has an angle. I was like, he wants us to be holy. He's putting the information out there. He's like, hey, his entire plan is directing everything for the good for those that are called according to his purpose. I was like, that's an angle. That's a grand scheme angle. And sometimes, much like Bob in this movie, maybe how Kay's character was going about it wasn't the best way. But sometimes people don't know what's best for them, and they need a little nudge. And this movie is a perfect example. It's like, hey, let's go ahead and get these two together because both of them are going to die. With never having found love if we don't push them, if we don't create this scenario where we have to get them on the train so they can start talking, so that they can go to Vermont and we can see all that snow.
Right.
It's going to be great. Ooh.
Wash your face, your hands, and hair with snow.
Yeah, and I'm like, no,
don't do that.
Really
No.
want that. It's gonna be pretty cold.
Yeah.
But I did think of two characters, both actually from The Hobbit, the book The Hobbit. So Bilbo. Bilbo is forced. Yeah, Bilbo is forced on his adventure, really, by Gandalf. He didn't know what's best for him, but Gandalf knew that no, this Hobbit, he needs to get out of his Hobbit hole, and he needs to go on an adventure. Gandalf doesn't even know how it's all going to work out and play out. He's just like, no, he needs to do this. And the other one is Bjorn in The Hobbit, where
one of the best
has
characters.
So for those that know, he's the shapeshifter. Gandalf has them come one by one, all the dwarves and stuff, because he would never let all the dwarves and the Hobbit in all at once. But by Gandalf having it broken up, Bjorn's like, okay, I guess I'll let another one, and okay, I'll let another one. And he doesn't know what's, a lot of times us fallible humans, we don't know what's best for us. And we had instantly, unfortunately, this is our own sin. A lot of times we would instantly push back against someone who has good intentions if they were just 100% forthright and said, listen, we're going to go on the train to Vermont and you're going to get to know this girl and you're going to marry her. It's like, that's what happens, or presumably that's what's going to happen. But if they were just all forthright, if they didn't all have an angle, none of that would have happened. So sometimes it's a good godly angles. Redeemed, use some wisdom things. Don't use straight deceit, but surprise people sometimes.
I was going to say, I mean, because there were people that were involved, setting folks up isn't always a terrible thing. And that's not exactly what happened with us, but we did have friends that were involved in trying to make sure that this happened.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. They were.
Yeah.
I had roommates who said, because they were like, oh, let's have him. They were going to meet us at.
It was for lunch, right?
Yeah, for lunch at Qdoba in good old Rapid City, South Dakota. And it was after church, and he came. They were going to meet him, and they were like, "Oh gosh, sorry, something came up. We got to go." And it ended up just being him and I, right? And so
that was our first date.
And so, September
11th.
Yeah. 2011.
We talked about it being the 10th anniversary
right.
of 9/11.
And where we were when it happened.
It was awkward,
war.
But,
we're back to the war, full circle. But anyway, I was an 8th grader in English class. And anyway, but
for the record, she wasn't in 8th grade when we met. So
no, sorry. That was September 11th.
I was like,
we were in a Qdoba. Well, no,
I promise. Like we were both adults.
No, we were both adults. I made sure he was of legal age.
This took a weird turn. But essentially that's what we're talking about.
Once we found out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But people kind of were pulling a
they
Danny
kind
and
of
Vera for
a
us.
slight nudge together, and it was kind of funny because I was not looking for a relationship, and neither was he. And so I think we were kind of in that time where it was, we definitely had a God nudge. I think, he knew stuff before we did, obviously.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how does an Iowa farm girl and a South Carolina kid meet? That just was not on my list of to-dos.
Obviously in South Dakota. That's how
yeah.
we do that. Yeah.
And so, it became pretty clear not long after we met that something else was definitely orchestrating this and not us. And so, another blessing to count.
That's right. Some days, at least, yeah.
But just throughout the movie, lots of redeeming things. And as you were saying, just everything has an angle, but every one of the angles throughout the movie, I think, kept a really nice balance. With it being a musical as well, it was nice to have the breaks between all the songs. They came at very good. It was very well put together. It felt very balanced, and like how God brings things to our life to keep us balanced. Like it was just, it just felt very complete at the end of the movie, and I like that positive ending. Not that really adds a whole lot, but anyway, it was
it does.
One thing I did notice.
Very well put together. Yes.
So in my final receive is get married and have 9 children. And if you're Presbyterian, go ahead and baptize them as well. And then
if you have to,
and then spend 5 minutes with each of them and leave the rest of the world alone for 45 minutes a day. That's
get off social media for 45 minutes.
It's like imagine how much better the world will be if you just focus on your kids for 45 minutes a day.
Right.
Everything else in the world will go away. It's a great advice. Literally, when I was listening to it, I was like, it's actually probably really good. I should spend more time with Calvin.
There you go.
Oh, that's a sweet name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is good.
Well,
this is a good episode.
Yeah, this was great. Mandy, thank you for coming on. Well, the credits are about to roll on this episode. So until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.